buy clothes. I emptied the money from the shoebox into the shopping bag and we skytrained downtown to the police station. Though we were the three musketeers, together still, even though our secret was out, even though Tom had ratted us out. It was funny, but I was feeling relieved, almost glad, and so was Tom. I could see it in his face. The crime spree was over. He hadn't cracked his knuckles once since his confession. I wasn't sure about Billy, but I thought he might be looking forward to the new adventure that would come once the police had their hands on us. It was odd, I didn't understand it, but it was like an unspoken agreement that kept us together to face this next challenge, the law. I had never been in a police station before, not that I could remember anyway. I sneaked a look at Billy's calm face and wondered if he knew something about police stations. There was a bunch of people milling about at a high counter. Staffing the counter were 2 police officers in blue uniform shirts, no hats. Behind the counter, 2 more police officers sat at a table, one writing, the other talking on the phone. We sat on a bench at the back of the room and waited for the hubbub to die down. After most of the people were gone, one of the police officers noticed us. "You waiting to see someone?" He was an older man with thin gray hair and a ginger nicotine-stained mustache. I stepped forward. Billy and Tom followed. The counter came out to my nose. "We've come to confess," I told him. Billy nodded. "We're turning ourselves in," he said. Tom cracked his knuckles. The officer smiled. "Oh, yes? Robbed a bank then, have we?" "6, I said. 7, said Billy. The officer turned to his partner, laughing. "Hear that, Beckett? These kids rob banks." He pointed. "She robbed 6 and he robbed 7. 13, his partner cried. "No," said Tom. 7 in total. "Oh, well now, 7's not so bad," he laughed. I held up my bag, and we're returning the money. The officer named Beckett took the bag and looked inside. He did a good imitation of Fish Eyes. "Well, I'll be..." The first officer looked in the bag. His grin disappeared. Fish Eyes again. "How much money's in here?" I shrugged. The total wasn't important. Why didn't they arrest us and get it over with? "Stay right there," Beckett told us. He picked up a phone and spoke into it. Then he hung up and stared at us, shaking his head. "Come with me." We followed him along a corridor to a door marked Chief Inspector Teal. Beckett knocked on the door before pushing it open. Chief Inspector Teal was wearing a dark green suit with a green tie. He got up from his desk as we entered. "Sit down," he said. "Could you bring an extra chair, Beckett?" Officer Beckett put the bag on the Chief Inspector's desk and left. Seconds later, he was back with a chair. We sat facing the Chief Inspector's desk. Billy was on one side of me, Tom was on the other. Officer Beckett left again. "Now, what's this all about? You robbed some banks, is that right?" The Chief Inspector used the friendly tone adults often use for children. He smiled at us the way a fond father smiled at a clever but naughty kitties. I pointed to the bag on the desk. "The money we stole is in there, every penny." Chief Inspector looked at the bag and then emptied it onto his desk. The bills fell out and formed a paper mountain in the middle of his desk. A few of them fluttered to the floor. Chief Inspector's jaw dropped. He stared at us. Then he stared at the money. Then he stared at us again. He picked up the telephone. "Beckett, bring your most recent files on bank robberies, will you?" Chief Inspector Teal and another plainclothes detective named Sergeant Finch asked 100 questions, recording our replies on tape. I thought the questions would never end, but eventually they did. They took us home in a police cruiser. Then they interviewed Joseph and Janice in a living room for almost 2 hours. About 10 days later, a summons arrived in the mail, ordering us to appear in the juvenile court the following week. Chapter 22, May 22nd. The judge was a woman with a long, narrow nose. She listened to an energetic young man in a gray suit and red tie describe the criminal offenses. She watched the shadowy security videos from 2 of the banks. I could barely make out Billy leaving the bank. It didn't look like him. It could have been anyone wearing glasses and a ball cap. Then the judge listened to our court-appointed defense counsel, Miss Farthingdale, who looked only a few years older than me. She had blonde hair to her shoulders and a swishy black suit. She had come to the house a few days ago asking us more questions. Miss Farthingdale told the judge about the bathroom problem. "These 3 young defendants, Your Honor, were trying to raise money to have an extra bathroom installed so they wouldn't have to leave their foster home. You see, Your Honor, regulations demand at least 2 full bathrooms in a house with 4 children. These children are very close. They did not want to see their family broken up. Staying together was worth any sacrifice to them. I would also like to point out, Your Honor, that the defendants used no weapons of any kind during the robberies. They meant no harm and they deeply regret their actions. The children, the defendants, turned themselves in and returned all the stolen money. Not 1 penny is missing, Your Honor. One final point, Your Honor. The children saw their cause as a noble one." "They saw robbing banks as a noble cause?" asked the judge, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Yes, Your Honor," said Miss Farthingdale firmly. "A noble cause indeed. Their intent was to ensure the survival of their family, a family that provides them with love and a sense of belonging, as well as security, also critically important for young people today. Wouldn't you agree, Your Honor? Huh, said the judge. Miss Farthingdale said, Your Honor, if the British Columbian social services system had been doing its job of looking after the welfare of needy children in this province, there would have been no need for the defendants to rob banks in the first place. They could have been killed or seriously injured, the judge said. If a security guard or a police officer had started shooting, innocent bystanders might have come to harm as well. Robbing banks is an extremely dangerous game, weapons or not, noble or not. She glared at us from her throne. I glared back. Billy looked like he was enjoying himself. His blue eyes sparkled with excitement. Tom was back to cracking his knuckles. The judge adjourned the case for a week. A week later, Joseph, Janice, and we 3 delinquents were back in juvenile court. We sat behind a table and waited for the judge to announce her decision. First of all, she said, I want to commend the 3 of you for your obvious concern for your foster parents, Janice and Joseph Hardy. It reflects well on them as caregivers. Your aim in committing these robberies was to help them. I fully understand that. I also understand that your aim was to help yourselves. You did not want to be taken away from the home and the people you love. What I do not understand is why the Hardys' home, which has an excellent history of helping young people, does not receive more support. It is homes like the Hardys that are so successful in keeping our youth off the streets by providing a safe and nurturing environment. I asked my staff to look into the matter, and I can tell you now that emergency funds have been found. The funds will build an extra facility. To build the extra facility will be provided within the next few months. She paused. I grinned at her. Your Honor, does that mean we won't have to move? Shh, Miss Farthingdale whispered. Her Honor is still speaking. The judge said, Yes, young lady, that is precisely what it means. I turned to my musketeers and we exchanged smiles of relief. I felt like jumping up and yelling 3 cheers for Her Honor the Judge, right there in the courtroom. I forced myself to be still and quiet. Now I will speak of the charges, said the judge, looking at us over her glasses. Bank robbery is a serious crime. The 3 of you confessed to the police that you committed 7 robberies. You have returned all the money, but you endangered and terrorized the lives of many innocent people. Therefore, you must be punished. You must make to understand that breaking the law has consequences, severe consequences. Nell Ford, Billy Galloway, and Tom Okada, please stand. We stood shoulder to shoulder like the 3 musketeers. I felt as if we were about to be given the death sentence. The judge took a deep breath. I have no other choice but to deal with you firmly. I hereby sentence each of you to 28 days in the Vancouver Juvenile Detention Home, starting at the end of the school year on July 3rd. At the conclusion of your sentence, you will perform 300 hours of community service. At the rate of 10 hours a week, it will take 7 months for you to work it off, 1 month for each bank you terrorized. When we got outside in the hallway with Janice and Joseph and Janice, I didn't know whether to feel depressed or excited. I said to them, they'll give you enough money to install the extra bathroom. Now none of us have to move out, right? They smiled happily. I can't tell you, Joseph said, how happy it makes us, Janice said. Except for, said Joseph. It's great, interrupted Billy, grinning like a maniac. Friggin' fantastic, Tom agreed. Joseph said, you won't think a month in juvenile detention's so fantastic, or the 300 hours of community service, finished Janice. It's going to be hard work. Juvie, I moaned. I knew Juvie was not a nice place. For a whole month? Joseph sighed. It'll probably be the hardest month of your life. How come? Tom growled. They work you from morning to night. I've seen it, so I know. You'll be mopping floors, cleaning and scrubbing, lifting and carrying, anything and everything. Kitchen work, field work, you name it. You're not going to like it, I promise. We groaned. Miss Farthingdale joined us. Don't complain, she said. It's an extremely light sentence. The judge was easy on you. Easy, said Billy. What did she do for hard? Send you to Siberia to work on a chain gang? I knew we'd end up in friggin' jail, moaned Tom. He turned to Billy. I friggin' told you. But Billy wasn't listening. He seemed stunned. Plus 300 of community work, he groaned. I said nothing. What could I say? Actually, I was so happy about leaving Janice and Joseph that I didn't care about this sentence. I would survive.